Okay, this is just going to be a little tutorial on how to assemble one of these PiMat Raspberry Pi based Rubik's Cube timers. So to start out, I'm just going to go through all the printed parts that you'll need. And we have the main body here, which I printed in two colors with a layer change right after the battery compartment was done. And then we have all the secondary pieces, like the two slide covers for the top and back, and then the bottom part that screws on. And we have two buttons. So these are all the printed parts you'll need. This is obviously going to take the most amount of time. And I print this diagonally on my Ender 3. It basically takes up the whole bed. And the only way I can print it is diagonal. And these I just print separately after the main part's done. All the pieces, or the main piece is printed, I print it in around 20% infill, and 2 perimeters and 3 top and bottom shells with no support. It has some integrated supports into the model at the bottom here for these the parts where the screws go into, and that's about it. There is a fair amount of bridging, but my printer has no problem with that. I haven't found a need for any auto-generated supports, so that's just about it with the 3D printed parts. And yeah, so before I start any actual assembly, the first thing I want to do is get the base ready, remove any like stringing or anything like that. Or there's usually with this big bridging section, there's usually a lot of like strings hanging down and stuff. So I usually just take my X-Acto and go through and take all that out. And then the next part is to clip these supports for the screw holes off. So I just come with these flush cutters and clip those like that. So you want to do that on all 4 of these holes. And it doesn't really matter if it's kind of rough. We'll clean that up when we actually go to put the inserts in with the screws. Oh, and it might shoot off like that. But yeah, so that's 2 done, and do the rest of them. Okay, so I've removed the 4 support sections near the screw holes, and this base piece is basically ready. There's nothing else I need to do with the printed parts for now. And the next step is to start preparing the switches and the wires that connect to the switches. So we're going to use these cherry switches. These are some knockoff cherry switches. Doesn't really matter as long as it's a standard one like this. And the main thing to look out for when getting these switches is, I don't know how well it will come through on the camera, but near the stem of the switch, it's either a rectangular hole or a circular hole. And the rectangular fits a lot better because if you look at these buttons, it's kind of a square shape for the stem. And if it's a circular hole like this, the button will not be able to press down fully. So what I usually do, because these are just the switches that I had, so I just come in here with the X-Acto and cut away at the case of the switch until it's like not rounded off corners like this, and then it'll fit fine. So I'm just going to do that to 4 or 2 switches, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so once you have both switches prepared, hopefully you can see that there's more of a rectangular cutout around the stem. You're going to want to just test it with your buttons to see if it's got a nice fit. And then the next step is to basically prepare some wires that are going to go from the switch housing here through the case and up into the top of the screen, because that's where the GPIO pins are going to be. And so we're going to use some of these cables that can connect to the GPIO header. For me, I don't have long enough of these cables that just one cable will work. So I'm going to modify 2 pairs into one to just extend the cable. It won't be necessary depending on your cable length, but you'll have to see what'll work for you. But basically it just goes through a hole in the switch housing, through the base here and into the screen, or through under the screen to the GPIO header. So I'll show you that now. Okay, so I've got the wires all stripped and ready to connect. I don't know if it's the best technique, but my technique for stripping these wires is to just use the X-Acto knife and try not to cut too deep, obviously, to cut the wires, but you just make a small cut in the sheathing or whatever, and just bend it until you see the wire, and then pull the sheathing off. But that's just because I don't have proper wire cutters, but it works pretty well. So I'm gonna get some heat shrink tubing and a soldering iron, and get these connected and soldered up, and then also solder this end to the buttons, and I'll show you that. Okay, so I've extended 2 of these wires, or 2 pairs of these wires, and one end is exposed wire, and one end is the connector for the GPIO header. And now all I have to do is solder the wires to the buttons, and then we have a pair of buttons for the timer. And so I'm just going to do that right now. It can be kind of tricky to solder to these small pins on the switches. What I usually do is curl the exposed wire a little bit, fold it over in half, and then you can sort of slide it over the pin on the switch, and that'll make it easier to solder to. So I'll just do that. Okay, so I have gotten both the switches soldered up, and it as you probably saw, it is kind of difficult to, at least for me, to get the wires soldered to this. But with that little folding over the wire technique and pushing it down onto the pin, you can usually get it to stay put and solder it, and it'll just flow around the wire and get like a good solid connection. So now we have both of these set up. You can sort of see how they're going to fit through here. What I like to do is use some tweezers to sort of route the wires. And you want it to go all the way through here, and then in to the bottom. And so we can do that now. There's a small hole right under the where the key switch goes, and then you can see these two leads come out, and you can just pull that through there, and then it'll come through on the bottom. And so you can pull the switch all the way through. The heat shrink gets stuck sometimes. There we go. So once the switch gets here, I usually like to put, it doesn't really matter which way you orient the switch, but I like to put the wires at the back because it puts the least amount of tension, and you can see the switch will just snap into place, and then the wires are coming out the bottom. So that's basically it for connecting the switches for now. I like to pull the wire out to the top, and as you can see, you don't really need a wire this long, but it just helps a lot when assembling, because you can connect all the wires while the Pi is out of the case, and then sliding it through is a lot easier, and then there's a lot of room for the wires in the bottom, and we'll see that later. I'm just going to connect the next switch, and then I'll show the next step will be this power switch, wiring that up, and then that is basically all the soldering that needs to be done. So I'll connect this next switch now. So now that both of these switches are wired up, the next thing we're going to focus on is putting in this rocker switch to do the power, and that will go right in this hole here. And we need a wire that's going to go from the switch to the USB output of the battery bank. So that'll be the last thing we need to solder up. And if you've gotten the same battery bank that I recommended, it comes with a couple wires. Let's see. So it comes with two. It comes with a USB-C cable. We're not going to need that. Well, you can use it once it's all done. You can still charge your phone or something with this USB-C output. But we're going to use this micro USB cable and we're going to modify it to put the switch in. So basically, get this out of the way. To do that, I'm gonna cut the cable closer to the micro USB end, because this will come from the battery bank, and it'll just be a more direct route if we cut it like about an inch away from the micro USB. And you don't have to use this cable. You can use any micro USB cable, but this one's just good because it's short and it'll allow more room for cables in the bottom. So once you cut this cable, we're gonna have to strip a small amount off of each side. So I've cut the cable, and then I stripped both the ends. And after you do that, you're gonna want to get some just random wire that you have laying around that is probably about the same thickness as this wire. And I've stripped both of these ends too of these pieces of wire. And then, so basically what we're wiring up here is you have, we're gonna have the switch over there, and we're gonna connect the ground, like I said, and then extend the red wire from both ends to the switch, like that basically. So it's not that complicated, and so I'll go do that now. Okay, so once you have the switch all wired up, the next thing we're going to do is insert it into the case, and you might need to trim, there's a couple tabs on the side of the switch, which you might need to trim off to get it in there, or you could just push it through and it'll just have a friction fit, but I like to super glue mine in, so you can see it slides in, but it is a little loose, so we're gonna put a couple drops of super glue and glue it in. Okay, so we got that switch in there now. It's glued in nice. So this is basically all the wiring done. So you have these two button wires that'll go up through here, and then this USB will connect right in there to the power bank, and this will go down to connect to the Pi. So yeah, we can put, we can start to put the screen and the Pi together. Usually I put the battery bank in first, so I'll go and do that. Another thing, when putting the battery bank in, you want to make sure that you put it in the right way. You can take it out later, but it is, yeah, you just want to put it in the right way, but, so you want the side with the USB ports on this side with this little hole for the LEDs for the battery, and you want to slide it in like this. It will be a tight fit, but you can take it out later. So you got that slid in, and you'll see the charging port there, and then I don't know if you can see inside, but there's a USB for the power. So that can be kind of tricky to get in, but sometimes you can have some tweezers to help you. I'll try to do that now. Okay, there we go. So that USB slid in, and so the battery's all done, the battery's in, and we can actually slide our cover through from the other side. Now that the battery is all in and done, I'm just going to give the battery a quick test, make sure the switch is on, and if we plug in to the Pi, the LED should light up. So yeah, we're good. I don't have an SD card or anything in here, but I'm still going to show you how to put the Pi and the screen in now. So the first thing is to put the screen on the Pi. It goes on the left GPIO. And before you do all this, before you put it in, you want to set up the screen. It comes with this card which tells you how to install the thing to get the screen to work. I'm just going to show you how to put it in right now. Actually, first, before you put the screen on, you want to connect the buttons. So they go to pins 19 and 26, which, if we're looking at it like this, we put the first two for the one button. It doesn't matter which button you put on which switch, or which GPIO, sorry. So the first two are on like this, and then the next two go, the third one right beside it, one of them, and then, if I can get it, like that, and then the next one is on the fourth pin on the top. So that's how these are connected, for the two buttons, and then you can put the screen on. Just sort of fold these wires down and push the screen in place. So the wires are coming out the bottom. And to put the screen, the whole assembly together, you want to first slide the power cable up through, like this. You probably want to flip the switch off, and then plug this in, like that. And you can pull all the cables through the bottom to get a nice, like, straight cable setup like that. And this part can be kind of tricky to slide the whole Pi through, because it is a tight fit. Sometimes pulling up on the screen can help. And it can get stuck on the ports on the left, so if it does, just push down the port, and then it'll just fully slide right in like that. And probably should have taken the screen protector off, but I'm going to end up taking this out anyways. So as you can see, there's no bezel around, everything looks good. And we can actually put the top cover on now, like that. So the whole screen is in, the USBs are showing at the side correctly. Now the next thing is just the cable management for the bottom, and putting the screw inserts in and the bottom on. Now we're going to put insert for each screw where we cut off that support earlier, and it's just a little M3 nut that comes with. It's the same thing that a lot of printers use. I'll have a link to these, so we're just going to need 4 of these little inserts, and we're actually going to use the soldering iron and to melt them into their spot, so that you don't need to be glued or anything, they'll just stick in there. I'll show you that. So first what I do is I take a screwdriver like this that can't fully push through, so we can use this to position it before we use the soldering iron. So I sort of just push it into the slot like that. You can see it just jams right in there, and then we'll later use the soldering iron to fully secure it. So do that for all 4. So all 4 of these are roughly positioned in the holes. I know the wire can get in the way of this, but I'm probably just going to tuck all this in while I do this. You want to get your soldering iron heated up, and you're going to just push right into the center of the insert until it's level with the printed surface. And so then you can put the lid on. So once the soldering iron's heated up, you're just going to push them in like this. It'll take a second for it to start melting, and then it'll slowly push through. You want to just push it until it's level with the surface. And make sure that when you're pushing the soldering iron down, that there's no wires right under where it's going to, or else you might melt the wire or something. So you could do this before you put all the wires in. I just chose to do it now, but okay, now you can see all the inserts are in and they're pretty level. Okay, so we're just going to do a little test insert, push any wires down, get them seated where they should be. Then get your cover, put it with the side for the screw head to be flush on this side, and then just test to see how flush it is. It looks pretty good, so we can go ahead and screw that in. And I use just 4 M3x8 screws. You could probably use longer, like M3x12 or something like that, but if you don't have these, because there is quite a bit of room at the bottom, but it's just M3 screws, so. So once you've screwed in the bottom and it's all flush, it should sit flat, and we're almost done. The only thing left to do is to put the buttons and the springs in. The springs are just springs from Cherry switches. I'll have a link for those as well. And you need 4 springs, and they just go in the little stabilizer slots here. Put those in. And then you can place your buttons on. And that should be good. Of course, you'll need to install the timer program and get it set up to launch on startup. And the instructions for all that are on my GitHub with the timer program itself. It's not very hard. Yep, so that's basically it.